Joining me now is Aboriginal man and former member for the Voice Referendum Working Group, Sean Gordan. Sean, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. We were speaking a lot in the lead up in the campaign to this vote, and now more than a year ago. With the passage of time, with 12 months, what are your reflections on what went wrong?
Well, look, I think, my opinion is I felt we did enough. I felt over the last 20 years of reconciliation action plans, the acknowledgement of countries, the flags crying across every council building across the nation, people having a greater understanding of the challenges facing Indigenous people with the Close the Gap initiative, been going on for more than 10 years now. I felt that we did enough to create this awareness of the need for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have a voice. But the reality is, we didn't count that the large majority of Australia just don't know enough about us. That they've not met an Aboriginal person, they've not been out and visited remote communities and understand the challenges, not just of remoteness, but the challenges of that exist in these remote communities. And so I've come to the conclusion that we were unable to reach an audience, 60% of the country who just don't know enough about us. And so I think the challenge moving forward is, how do we ensure that we bring non-Aboriginal people into our communities, into our culture, so that they better understand who we are?
Sean, that's really interesting that you say that, because if 60% of Australians don't know enough about you and Indigenous culture, that is a problem in and of itself. What perhaps Australians do know, or the exposure that they do have, are the welcome to countries at every corporate event or public event. And that, I feel like, has lost its meaning. The other side of that argument, Sean, if Australians, non-Indigenous Australians, know anything about Indigenous Australia, it's usually on the negative side, that intractable problem of violence, alcohol, domestic violence, that kind of thing, and crime. Would you agree with that?
No, negative stories sell. Negative stories spark people's interest, and unfortunately, fortunately for me, I get to work with communities right across the country. Yeah. At the moment, I'm working in near 36 communities. I've led major initiatives to establish place-based models to empower communities to be able to deal with local challenges at a local level. Yeah. I think the real issue is, and this is the frustration of Aboriginal affairs at the moment. The Albanese government haven't walked back from the election commitment of honouring the Uluru Statement from the Heart. They've completely run away from it, and completely running away from it, you've then got the opposition who want to go back to draconian punitive measures, where they haven't learned anything from the Northern Territory intervention, but they want to then go back to those punitive measures of we've just seen with the newly elected NT government. Yeah.
But Sean,
winding back
when you look at the closing the gap, when you look at the stories, and I know you say that negative stories sell, but I mean, there's a lot to report, and it is our duty here as a news organisation to shine a light on the negativity, really, the violence, to kind of spur on some change and significant change, because really
the problem
nothing
is, Laura,
has worked.
The change doesn't come. The change doesn't come.
No.
And people generally think that the problem here is Aboriginal communities. What people don't understand is the overreach of government in those communities, this cradle to the grave approach of policies and programs. Oh, absolute overreach. Absolute overreach.
Yeah, but it's been overreach for so long, Sean, that if governments did step back, there's not that agency within a lot of these Aboriginal communities. I mean, intervention is required in some cases, isn't it?
The agency was the voice. How do you empower people and give them a voice to take responsibility for the things that we're responsible for? How do you get government out of the way so the government become enablers, not the doers? Government are not doers, but in the Aboriginal affairs space, governments are the ones doing the work. They are not the doers. They are enablers. They just like they enable all other Australians. They have a responsibility and a role to enable Indigenous Australians to be able to step up and take responsibility for the things that we're responsible for. The voice and the objective of the voice was to do that. And I've seen
do you think Australians doubted the ability for Aboriginal communities to step up and do that themselves? Essentially, that's fundamentally what the problem was.
No, the problem was that not enough non-Indigenous Australians know enough about us.
So you're talking taking away that intervention and taking away the money, or leaving the money there but removing the intervention?
Well, the money's got to be there, but the money doesn't necessarily... the money needs to stay with government.
Yeah.
Oh, look, absolutely, it's an extraordinary amount of money. And when you look at the bureaucracy and the amount of money that flows through bureaucracy, the bulk of it sits within government. It doesn't sit within Aboriginal communities. A very small percentage of funds actually hit the ground in communities to be able to deliver the outcomes that are needed. The current structure that the government have put in place of peak bodies, being the voice for Aboriginal communities, is not a solution. How can you be the voice for the community when you're the one charged with receiving the funds and delivering the services and failing in delivering those services? We've got to set up structures that empower local people to be able a greater say on the programs, the policies and the resources to ensure that you get better outcomes. Right now, that model doesn't exist. It has never existed. And until we put something like that in place and empower Aboriginal people and give them agency, nothing will change.
Sean, great to talk to you again. It's a really difficult area to talk about sometimes. I really always appreciate your insights, especially today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Laura. And look, unfortunately, we're not seeing solutions coming out of the government or the opposition at the moment on a way forward. And that's the sad reality of where we are, 12 months on from the referendum.
Yep. As predicted, it's been dropped like a hot potato, hasn't it? Let's hope that changes. We know that elections often change things, so let's hope it's the same this time. Sean, thanks.